I had just finished washing my hands in the bathroom when I heard the car doors slam shut. Chloe and her friends, Ella, Stephanie, and Lauren, were laughing, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the gas station restroom. They always made noise like that, loud and carefree, and it made me smile. It was one of those things I used to love about them. I dried my hands and glanced at my phone, no new messages. I was about to step out when I heard the familiar sound of their laughter fading, getting quieter. I thought it was strange. I opened the bathroom door and stepped into the dimly lit station. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured they had gone inside for snacks or maybe to stretch their legs. The long drive from Denver to Grand Junction had been boring and Chloe had mentioned needing a break. But after a few minutes I started to wonder. There was no sign of them inside the store. The only person in sight was the gas station attendant, a grumpy older guy who didn't even look up from his magazine when I walked past. I stepped outside, hoping to see Chloe leaning against the car, chatting with Ella or laughing at something Stephanie said. But there was nothing. The parking lot was empty. I felt my stomach tighten. Maybe they were just messing with me, I thought. A prank, like always. Chloe had a way of keeping things lighthearted, but sometimes it went too far. I couldn't tell you how many times she'd gotten me with one of her jokes, hiding my things or playing tricks, but it was always in good fun. So I called out, "Chloe." Nothing. I checked the time on my phone. 15 minutes had passed since I'd last seen them. 15 minutes too long. "Chloe." I called again, a little more forcefully. The panic that had been creeping up my chest began to swell. I walked back inside, trying to act casual. I didn't want to look stupid, like I was overreacting. But the gas station attendant wasn't helping. He just stared ahead, still flipping through his magazine as if I hadn't said a word. I walked up to him. "Hey, have you seen my wife?" A group of women, tall, dark hair. They came in with me. He barely looked up. "Nope." "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling the first prickling sense of anxiety at the back of my neck. I was starting to get that gut feeling, the one that told you something wasn't right. Something had shifted, but I couldn't place it. He shook his head. "No, man. Haven't seen anyone." I nodded stiffly and stepped outside again. My eyes scanned the parking lot, the empty stretch of road ahead, the distant outline of the mountains. No sign of the car, no sign of Chloe. That's when I felt it. The cold, heavy weight of realization started to settle over me like a blanket of ice. They were gone. They had just left. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My chest tightened and I found myself standing still, frozen. My mind raced as I tried to think of an explanation. Maybe they went to get gas? Maybe they'd had an emergency? But I knew deep down, this wasn't some prank. They weren't coming back. I pulled out my phone again, but there was no signal. I stepped back inside the store, my hands shaking as I paced in front of the attendant. "I need to use your phone," I said, my voice hoarse. "I've got to call my wife." The attendant sighed, clearly uninterested in helping, but he pulled out his old, cracked cell phone and handed it to me without saying a word. I dialed Chloe's number and listened to the ringing on the other end. I wasn't sure what I expected, but the voice that answered was Stephanie's. "Hello?" Her tone was off, like she'd been caught off guard. It wasn't the casual, playful greeting I was used to from her. "Stephanie? Where the hell is Chloe? Why didn't you guys wait for me?" There was a long pause on the other end. "And then, Mike, we didn't wait because, well, we couldn't." "What do you mean you couldn't?" I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. "Where is she? Where are you all?" "We're gone, Mike," she said, her voice almost too calm. "Chloe doesn't want to be with you anymore. We're all leaving. Don't bother looking for us." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt my vision blur, the noise of the gas station fading as I struggled to process what she was saying. "Wait, what?" I stammered. "You're leaving me? After all this time?" I heard a harsh laugh from her side of the line, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was something colder, more detached. "You're just not a part of our world anymore, Mike. You've been invisible. It's not the same. We don't have to explain ourselves." I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I stood there in the cold, the phone pressed to my ear, hearing nothing but the hum of the store's fluorescent lights and Stephanie's empty silence. And then she hung up. I stood in the middle of the gas station, staring at the phone, unable to move. My mind couldn't make sense of what had just happened. This was real. She was gone. Chloe was gone. I was alone. The anger hit me next, sharp and quick, followed by waves of hurt. I had spent 5 years being treated like an outsider in my own marriage. I had been belittled by Chloe and her friends, made to feel like a joke. But this was a betrayal I never saw coming. I dropped the phone back onto the counter and turned toward the door, my chest heaving as the truth sank in. The woman I had loved, the woman I had worked so hard for, she had just abandoned me without a second thought. I stood there in the cold, lonely gas station in the middle of nowhere for what felt like hours before I realized it. I had no choice but to walk away. I had to. For the first time, I could feel the weight of years of being manipulated and used by Chloe and her friends. My frustration, my anger, it all started to turn into something else, something deeper, something that told me I needed to break free. I needed to rebuild. And I wasn't going to do it for them anymore. I had no idea where I would go or what I would do next, but in that moment I knew this was the end of something and the beginning of something new. The sun had barely risen when I found myself standing on the side of the highway, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder and a hitchhiker's thumb raised in the air. The loneliness was overwhelming. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. There were no plans, no direction. Just me and a bag of clothes, stranded in the middle of nowhere, all because Chloe and her friends decided I was no longer worth the effort. The trucker who finally pulled over wasn't much of a talker. He had a long, grizzled beard and a voice that sounded like gravel being ground underfoot. He barely looked at me when I climbed into the passenger seat. The truck's interior smelled like tobacco and stale coffee, a scent that made my stomach churn as I settled in, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. "Where you headed?" he finally asked, eyes fixed on the road. I didn't know how to answer. I hadn't even figured that out yet. "Grand Junction," I said after a moment, the name popping into my head. It seemed like as good a place as any to figure things out. Just need to get somewhere. The trucker grunted, nodding like it didn't matter much to him where I was going, just so long as I wasn't asking for a ride to anywhere too far out of his way. The drive was long and silent, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional cough or grumble from the trucker. We passed mile after mile of empty land, rolling hills and distant mountains that seemed just as empty as I felt. By the time we pulled into Grand Junction, I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on me. The trucker dropped me off near a small, dingy motel, probably not the safest place in town, but it was all I could afford with the little cash I had left. I thanked him, my voice thick with the remnants of the rage and hurt I'd been holding in all day. "Take care of yourself, kid," the trucker said, giving me a nod before pulling away. It was the first piece of kindness I'd gotten since everything fell apart. I stood there for a moment, staring at the motel's flickering neon sign. The place looked about as rundown as my life felt at that moment. A worn-out, half-faded vacancy sign hung in the window like a quiet invitation to disappear. The door to the office creaked open as I walked in, and the woman behind the counter gave me a long, assessing look before asking for my ID. I handed it over, trying to steady my hands. $40 a night, she said, glancing down at the paper in front of her, not bothering to meet my eyes. I paid in cash, no questions asked. She handed me a key and pointed toward the hallway without so much as a smile. The room smelled like stale air and the sheets looked like they hadn't been changed in a while, but it didn't matter. It was a roof over my head for the night, and that was all I could afford. I set my bag down on the bed and sank into the chair by the window, staring out at the parking lot below. I felt like I had nothing left. No phone calls to make, no friends to reach out to. Chloe had taken everything from me. All the years of being treated like an outsider, of being belittled by her and her friends, it all led to this. The cold realization that I was completely, utterly alone. But I couldn't stay like this. I couldn't keep feeling sorry for myself. I had to get up. I had to do something. The next morning, I found myself walking into a small, rundown homeless shelter just a few blocks away. It wasn't the place I'd ever imagined myself visiting, but when you have nothing, you have no choice but to take whatever help you can get. An older man named Roy greeted me. He was tall and thin, with rough hands and a slow, deliberate way of speaking. There was something calm about him, something steady that made me feel just a little less out of place. "Could use some help?" he asked, studying me with eyes that had seen far too much for one lifetime. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Roy didn't ask for details. He didn't ask what had brought me here or why I was so far from home. He just helped me fill out some paperwork, gave me a warm meal, and directed me to a small cot in the corner of the shelter. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but I did, and when I woke up, the weight of everything still hung over me, but it didn't feel quite so suffocating anymore. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, trying to figure out how to get my life back on track. Roy helped me navigate the system, filling out forms to get a new ID, helping me apply for work, even directing me to a diner where I could ask for a job. I had never imagined that I'd end up here, scraping by in a small town, washing dishes at a diner, but I had nothing left to lose. My old life was gone, and I had no choice but to start from the ground up. It wasn't much, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing something for myself. It wasn't easy. The work was hard and the hours were long. I scrubbed dishes for hours on end, barely speaking to anyone other than the occasional customer or fellow worker. But every time I got paid, I felt a little better. It was mine. I had earned it. And each night, as I lay down on that uncomfortable cot in the shelter, I reminded myself that it wasn't over. This wasn't the end. I was rebuilding. Step by step. And maybe, just maybe, I could make something of this broken life after all. A couple of weeks had passed since I started working at the diner. Things weren't easy, but they weren't unbearable either. I was getting used to the grind. Washing dishes, running the occasional errand, and scraping together what little I could each week to start saving for something more. A small apartment. A real bed. A place where I wouldn't have to sleep on a thin cot in the back of a shelter. I spent most of my days in a haze of dishes and dish soap, the buzz of the diner's fluorescent lights overhead becoming the soundtrack of my new life. There was nothing glamorous about it, but it felt real. Every dollar I earned felt like a small victory. Roy had been a steady presence, always willing to help when I needed advice or just someone to talk to. He'd been through his own share of struggles, he told me, and every time he spoke about it, it was like he was handing me a little piece of strength to hold onto. "You'll get there," he told me one afternoon when I mentioned my frustration about still being stuck in a rut. Step by step, the small stuff adds up. But even in the midst of the routine, my mind always drifted back to Chloe. I hadn't heard from her or any of her friends. And while part of me wanted to reach out to ask for answers or even an apology, I knew deep down that it wouldn't change anything. I had been a part of their world for 5 years, but now I was just gone. The phone call came on a Tuesday around midday, right when the diner was starting to fill up for the lunch rush. I was leaning over the counter, scrubbing away at a greasy pan, when the old, cheap prepaid phone I had bought a few days ago buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting some telemarketer or another bill collector trying to get me to pay for something I couldn't afford. But when I saw Chloe's name on the screen, my heart dropped. For a moment, I just stared at the phone, the weight of the past few weeks crashing down on me. I hadn't blocked her number. Maybe it was that small part of me that still held onto the hope that she'd come back, that this was just some mistake that would be fixed with a single conversation. But I knew better now. I'd had time to process it all. She wasn't coming back. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my thumb hovering over the green button. "Mike?" Her voice, familiar and full of fake concern, came through the speaker. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to hang up to silence her. But something in me, some deep, broken part of me, still needed to hear her explanation. "What do you want, Chloe?" I finally asked, my voice flat. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then she spoke again, her tone a little softer. "Mike, we're really worried about you. You just disappeared and—" "I don't know, I just thought you'd want to hear from me. I've been calling and texting, but I guess you've been too busy to pick up." I closed my eyes, the anger bubbling up inside me. I had blocked her on social media, but there were still the voicemails, so many voicemails. All full of fake concern and the hollow promises of everything being just fine. "I'm fine," I said, cutting her off before she could go any further. "Better than fine, actually. I've been working. Figuring things out. You know, the things you should have asked about before you left me at a gas station." There was another silence. A long one this time. I could almost hear her scrambling for something to say that would fix what had happened. That would undo the damage. But she didn't have the words, not anymore. I'm sorry," Chloe stammered, the words feeling rehearsed like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. "We were just having fun, Mike. It wasn't meant to be like this. I didn't want it to go this far. I just thought you'd find it funny, you know? You know how I get, and Ella and the girls, we were just playing a prank." I shook my head, my grip on the phone tightening. "A prank? You left me there, Chloe. You left me in the middle of nowhere. And you expect me to think it was funny." I couldn't stop the bitterness in my voice. "Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I didn't realize what you did?" She was silent again, and I could tell from her hesitation that she was struggling to come up with something to make this okay. But there was no way to fix it. No words to erase the coldness of that moment, the feeling of being abandoned and discarded. "Mike, please," she said after a long pause. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just having fun with my friends. You know how we do, right? It wasn't supposed to turn out like this." I felt my chest tighten. The frustration, the anger, the hurt, it was all there, all bubbling to the surface. I had spent so much time being the butt of their jokes, constantly belittled and humiliated, and now she expected me to forgive her with a few empty words? "I'm done with you, Chloe," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Done with all of you. You took everything from me. And for what? A joke? A prank?" I didn't wait for her to respond. I hit the red button and cut her off. The anger was still there, still simmering beneath the surface, but now there was something else, something lighter. Something like the first taste of freedom. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was finally taking control. It wasn't about her or Ella or Stephanie or Lauren anymore. It was about me. It was about moving on. I threw the phone onto the counter and stood there for a moment, the noise of the diner coming back into focus. The clatter of plates, the hum of the refrigerator, the chatter of customers, it was all there, and I was here. And for the first time in a long while, it felt like it was enough. The next few months blurred by. I didn't think much about Chloe or her friends. I couldn't afford to. My days were consumed by the diner, the never-ending pile of dishes, and the small, slow steps toward building something new. There were still moments when I caught myself wondering if I had made the right choice, wondering if I had a chance to make things right. But every time I had that thought, the anger crept in, and I reminded myself that there was no going back. I couldn't be the guy who kept taking the scraps they threw at me. The diner became my anchor. It was small, but it had character. The kind of place that had been around for decades and survived every wave of new trends. The food was greasy but comforting, the coffee was always hot, and the customers were regulars who felt like family. I started to fall into a rhythm that felt comfortable. The hours were long, but they passed quickly. My hands were always moving, either scrubbing, cooking, or setting plates on the counter, but I didn't mind. It kept me occupied, kept me from thinking too much. Roy had been right. Step by step. That's how things got better. I wasn't living high on the hog, but I was surviving, and surviving felt good. The owner of the diner, Jacqueline, was a no-nonsense woman with short, graying hair and a laugh that could fill the entire room. She had hired me on the spot after my interview. I had nothing but the clothes on my back and a few crumpled bills in my wallet, but she didn't care. "You got hands, you can work," she had said. And that was all that mattered to her. I started out washing dishes and doing odd jobs around the kitchen, but after a few weeks, Jacqueline gave me more responsibility. One night, she pulled me aside as I was drying a stack of plates. "Mike, I've been thinking," she said, eyes scanning the diner like she was sizing me up. "I want to offer you something more." I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. "More?" I asked. She nodded. "I need someone to help out as a prep cook. I'm not asking you to be a chef, but you've got the work ethic. And I could use the help. How do you feel about moving up?" The offer felt like a lifeline. The pay would be better, and it would give me some stability. It was more responsibility, but it wasn't a leap too far. I nodded, trying to hide my excitement. "I'm in," I said, not missing a beat. Jacqueline smiled and patted me on the back. "Good. You'll start tomorrow. Don't let me down." It was a small step, but it felt like I was climbing up from the bottom. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new role, chopping vegetables, prepping meat, and working side by side with the other cooks. I wasn't great at it yet, but I was getting there. I had learned how to move quickly and how to handle the heat of a busy kitchen. And at the end of each shift, I felt like I had earned something. Roy had been right about something else too, about the small wins adding up. Each paycheck was a small victory, each day spent working hard felt like a small step forward. And slowly, I was starting to see that I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to build something. Maybe not a lot, but it was mine. It was a life I had control over. The customers at the diner started to recognize me, started to nod when they saw me across the room. The regulars greeted me with friendly hellos, and one woman even asked how my day was going. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. One of those regulars was Sienna. She came in at least 3 times a week, always sitting at the same corner booth by the window. She wasn't flashy or loud, just quiet and polite, with a way of making you feel like she was actually listening when you spoke to her. She always ordered the same thing, a cup of black coffee and a slice of pie. I wasn't sure what it was, but there was something about her that made me want to be around her more. Maybe it was the way she smiled when I handed her her coffee, or maybe it was because, for the first time in a long while, someone made me feel noticed. Not for my mistakes or failures, just for who I was at that moment. One day, as I was clearing plates from her table, she caught my eye and smiled. "How's the new gig going?" she asked, her voice light but genuine. "Good. Really good," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. "A lot more work, but it feels right, you know?" She nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. "That's good. You've got a good vibe about you. I think you'll do great." The words made me pause for a moment, just long enough to realize how much I needed to hear them. "Thanks," I said quietly, not sure how to respond. The conversation didn't go much further that day, but it stuck with me. As the weeks wore on, our conversations became more regular. Sometimes we'd talk while I worked, sometimes after my shift while she lingered over the last drops of her coffee. She'd ask me about my day and I'd ask about hers. We didn't delve into anything deep, but it was enough to make me feel like I was part of something. And with each passing day, I began to feel something else, a little less alone. But there was still that nagging thought in the back of my mind. Chloe. The life I had once had. The life I thought was real, but now seemed like it belonged to someone else. I hadn't heard from her since the phone call, and part of me was relieved. The other part, the part that had been with her for 5 years, still missed her. But Sienna's presence was a reminder of how far I had come in such a short time. I wasn't where I wanted to be yet, but I was moving forward. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like that was enough. Maybe you should get out of here for a bit, Sienna said one afternoon as she pushed her empty coffee cup toward me. Take a break. You work a lot. I was used to the long hours, but the idea of getting away from the diner, even just for a bit, was tempting. Maybe you're right, I said with a smile, feeling a little lighter than I had in weeks. Sienna grinned back. Well, if you need company, you know where to find me. And just like that, I felt something shift. Something inside me that had been buried for so long. A sense of hope. A sense of possibility. It was small, but it was there, just like everything else in my life. Step by step. Slowly but surely. It was a new beginning. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was starting over. I felt like I was finally finding my way. It was a crisp Friday afternoon when Jacqueline pulled me aside. I had just finished my shift, wiping down counters and putting away the last of the dishes for the night. The usual low hum of the diner's kitchen was giving way to the soft chatter of the evening crowd, and I was about to clock out when she stepped into the room, her expression serious. Mike, she said, catching my attention. Got a minute? I wiped my hands on my apron and nodded, walking over to where she stood by the back door. The kitchen smelled of grease and spices, but there was a quiet urgency in her voice that made me wonder what was going on. What's up? I asked, leaning against the counter. Jacqueline glanced around quickly, as if making sure no one else was nearby. She lowered her voice slightly. I've been thinking, she said, her eyes sharp. I think you're ready for more. I raised an eyebrow, not quite sure what she meant. More. She gave me a small, knowing smile. More than just washing dishes, Mike. You've been here long enough now to show you've got the skills. You're working hard, and I'm noticing it. You're starting to get the flow of the kitchen, and honestly, I think you've got potential. So here's the thing. There's a second location of the diner, smaller, but it's been struggling a bit. I need someone to take over, someone who can run the day-to-day, make sure things are moving smoothly. I think you're the guy for it. My mind raced as the words sank in. My first instinct was to laugh it off. Me? Run a diner? I was still getting used to working in the kitchen of this one, and here Jacqueline was offering me an entire place to manage. But she was serious. Her expression was steady, her eyes locked onto mine, waiting for me to say something. Wait, you want me to run it? I asked, still processing. Yeah, she said, her voice firm but warm. I know it's a big step, but I think you've got it in you. It's not going to be easy, but if you're up for the challenge, we could make it work. You've been doing a great job here, and I want to give you that opportunity. I took a breath, trying to gather my thoughts. The offer was so unexpected, so out of left field, but it was exactly the kind of thing I had been needing, a way to move forward. To take control of my future, something other than just scraping by. I thought about the hours I'd spent in this diner, washing dishes, prepping food, getting to know the rhythm of it all. I'd started from the bottom, but I wasn't there anymore. And maybe it was time for me to stop holding myself back. You really think I can handle it? I asked, my voice quieter now, more serious. The weight of her words was starting to settle on me. Jacqueline nodded. I do. I've watched you. You've got the right attitude, the right work ethic. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I believe you can handle it. If you take it, you'll be in charge, make the calls, run the place. You'll have a chance to show what you've got, to build something of your own. And trust me, that's worth it. Her words hit me harder than I expected. A chance to build something of my own. A chance to prove to myself and to everyone else that I could succeed. I could finally escape the shadows of my old life, leave behind all the mistakes, all the baggage. I thought about the weeks I'd spent here in the diner, how much I had learned, how far I had come. I wasn't the same guy I had been when I first walked in through those doors, lost and beaten down. I had a purpose now, a direction. I looked at Jacqueline, who was waiting patiently like she already knew what my answer would be. But I had to think about it, weigh the possibilities. Okay, I said finally, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. I'll do it. I'm in. Jacqueline's smile spread wide and she slapped me on the back. Good. You won't regret it. We'll talk logistics tomorrow, but I wanted to make sure you knew what I was thinking. I'm excited to see what you can do. I walked out of the kitchen that night with a sense of excitement building in my chest. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I had just committed to something huge. I didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. This was my chance. My chance to take control. To build something real. That night, I stayed up late, sitting in the small motel room I had called home for weeks. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. I could already imagine the second diner, what it could be like, how I could shape it into something that was truly mine. I could make it work. I had to. The phone call from Chloe felt like a distant memory now. I wasn't the same person I had been when she walked out on me. I had a new path, a new future to focus on. And for the first time, I felt like I was moving forward. The next day, I started putting things in motion. The second diner would need work, but it was mine to take on. The grind had paid off. It had been a few months since I accepted Jacqueline's offer to run the second diner. The new place was small, nowhere near as busy as the original, but there was potential. I worked long hours learning the ins and outs of managing a restaurant. There were days when I felt completely out of my depth, overwhelmed by everything, but I reminded myself, I had gotten this far and I wasn't about to give up now. The work was hard, but I was making progress. Every day I spent in the diner, I felt more confident. Slowly, I started making the place my own, adding new dishes to the menu, tweaking the layout to make the space feel cozier, more welcoming. The customers were slowly starting to notice and the little diner was picking up. I was beginning to feel like I had control over my life again. But just when things were starting to feel steady, something unexpected pulled me back into the mess I had worked so hard to escape. One morning, after a particularly busy breakfast shift, I checked my phone. There was a notification from LinkedIn, of all places, and when I saw the name attached to it, my stomach sank. Chloe. I wasn't sure what to think. Part of me wanted to ignore it, block the message, pretend she didn't exist in my world anymore. But there was that small part of me, the part I'd been trying to bury, that felt a pull. A curiosity. Why was she looking for me now? I opened the message. Hey Mike, I've been thinking about you lately. I know things ended badly, but I've been looking at your profile. I hope you're doing okay. Would love to catch up sometime. Let me know when you're free. Chloe. It wasn't much, just a short, almost formal message. But the words hit me like a ton of bricks. I've been thinking about you lately. I wasn't sure what bothered me more, the fact that she had been thinking about me at all, or that after everything she'd done, she thought it was okay to just reach out like nothing had happened. My mind immediately went to the last few months, to the life I was starting to build. I couldn't deny that a small part of me was angry, hell, a lot of me was angry. But I also felt conflicted. I hadn't heard from her since that phone call weeks ago. She hadn't tried to reach out after she and her friends abandoned me at that gas station, leaving me stranded in the middle of nowhere with nothing but my own anger and confusion. And now, out of nowhere, this? I stood there in the small office of the diner, staring at the message on my phone. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and for a moment I just couldn't bring myself to reply. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I didn't need to respond. I wasn't the same person I had been when Chloe left me behind. That Mike, the one who would have dropped everything to get back in her good graces? He was gone. And I wasn't going to let her or anyone else drag me back into the toxic cycle I had fought so hard to escape. Instead of replying, I closed the app and put my phone down on the counter. The message sat there, unanswered, just another reminder of my past. I wasn't sure why it had come up now, why Chloe was reaching out again, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going back. But just as I was about to turn my attention back to the stack of papers on my desk, a familiar voice broke through the silence of the diner. Everything okay? Sienna stood in the doorway of the small office, her arms crossed over her chest, a curious look on her face. I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, just something from the past. Nothing to worry about. She stepped into the room, her eyes still focused on me. You sure? You've been a little off lately. I shrugged, trying to brush it off. It's nothing. Just old stuff coming back up. Sienna didn't buy it. She knew me better than I gave her credit for, and she wasn't about to let me off easy. Mike, if it's bothering you, you can talk about it. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away. I hadn't let anyone in since I'd started rebuilding my life. I had learned to keep my thoughts and frustrations to myself, to keep moving forward. But Sienna's quiet support was hard to ignore. She didn't ask for anything, didn't try to push me into revealing anything I wasn't ready to share. She just listened. I got a message from Chloe, I said finally, the words coming out in a rush, like they had been sitting on the tip of my tongue for too long. Sienna didn't flinch. She just nodded, waiting for me to continue. She reached out. On LinkedIn. Wants to catch up, I said, mimicking the words Chloe had written in her message. My voice was bitter, but I didn't care. It's just, after everything, it feels like she thinks she can just come back in and act like nothing happened. Sienna's expression softened. You don't have to do anything, Mike. You don't owe her anything. I nodded, but the nagging feeling in my gut didn't go away. I don't want to go back to that life. But part of me still wonders why she's doing this now. Why now? Maybe she feels guilty, Sienna said, her voice quiet. Maybe she wants to make things right. But that's not your problem, Mike. You've done the work. You've come so far. Don't let her pull you back into something that's not good for you. Her words were the truth and they stung. She was right. Chloe wasn't my problem anymore. And yet, the fact that she was still out there, still trying to contact me, left a bitter taste in my mouth. I stared at the screen of my phone, Chloe's message still sitting there, waiting for a response I wasn't sure I could give. But Sienna was right. I had moved on. I had a new life, one that didn't include her, and it was time to stop letting the past control me. I made a decision then and there. I wasn't going to reply. I wasn't going to let Chloe's message pull me back into that world. My new life, my new routine, was enough. I didn't need to go backward. Thanks, Sienna, I said, finally looking up at her. I think I needed to hear that. She smiled softly. Anytime, Mike. Anytime. And as I put the phone back down on the counter, a sense of finality settled over me. I had learned to move forward without looking back. It was time to stop letting the past shape my future. It was time to let go. It was a few weeks after I decided to ignore Chloe's message. The second diner was growing, slowly but steadily. I had learned to handle the day-to-day operations, deal with suppliers, manage the staff, and make sure the place felt welcoming. Jacqueline's faith in me was paying off, and for the first time in a while, I felt like I was in control of my life. But just when I thought I was finally out of the woods, fate had a way of throwing curveballs. I was in the middle of prepping for the lunch rush, chopping vegetables and keeping one eye on the fryer, when I heard a familiar voice from the front of the diner. My heart sank when I looked up and saw Chloe, Ella, Stephanie, and Lauren walking through the door. I froze, knife still in hand, as the reality of the situation hit me like a punch to the gut. They were here, in my diner. I hadn't seen any of them since the day Chloe and her friends had abandoned me at that gas station. I hadn't expected to see them again, certainly not here, not in this place that I had worked so hard to make mine. But there they were, walking in like nothing had happened. Chloe was the first to spot me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second it felt like everything else in the diner faded into the background. She flashed me an uncertain smile, the kind she used when she was trying to pretend nothing was wrong. Mike, she said, her voice just a little too casual, like we were meeting for the first time in years instead of after she had abandoned me. Wow, this place is great. We didn't know you were running your own diner now. I didn't say anything at first. My heart was pounding in my chest, the anger bubbling up again. I wanted to yell at her, ask her how she could just waltz in here like nothing had happened. But instead, I just took a deep breath and set the knife down, forcing a smile. Yeah, things are going well, I said, my voice tight. What can I get you? Ella, Stephanie, and Lauren stood awkwardly behind Chloe, glancing around the diner with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. I could see the tension in their eyes, the way they avoided looking directly at me like they were afraid I'd snap. They knew what they had done. They knew how badly they had hurt me. Chloe turned to her friends and gave them a small nod. We'll just take a seat for now, she said, her tone almost too chipper, too fake. We're just passing through. Thought we'd check out the place. I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check, though it was clear she wasn't here just to check out the diner. They had a purpose. I knew it. As they made their way to a booth, I felt the weight of the moment press down on me. The anger, the confusion, the years of being treated like I wasn't good enough for any of them, it all came rushing back. I couldn't let them think they could just stroll in, act like everything was fine, and walk away without consequences. I wiped my hands on my apron, took a deep breath, and walked over to their table. They looked up as I approached, and Chloe gave me another one of those fake smiles. Hi, Mike, she said, trying to sound casual. Have you been? The question caught me off guard, not because I didn't expect it, but because of the way she asked it. It was the same question she might have asked a stranger, someone she barely knew. There was no hint of genuine concern, just an attempt to make things feel normal again. But things weren't normal. Things were far from normal. I've been doing fine, I said, my voice cold. But I'm not sure that's the question you should be asking. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly, glancing at her friends for reassurance. Ella was looking at me with an apologetic expression, but she didn't say anything. The others just stared at their menus, clearly uncomfortable. Mike, come on, Chloe said, her voice a little softer now, like she was trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. We're just here to catch up. I know things ended badly, but it doesn't have to be like this. We didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at her, my chest tight with frustration. You didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Chloe, you left me stranded. You walked away without a second thought. And now you think I'm just supposed to pretend like it didn't happen. The words felt like they were pouring out of me now, unstoppable. You want to act like everything is fine, like we can just be friends again, but it doesn't work like that. You don't get to play that game anymore. The table was silent. Chloe's face flushed a little, but she didn't back down. Ella shifted uncomfortably in her seat, but no one else said anything. I could feel the weight of their guilt, their awareness of the harm they had caused, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. I know you're angry, Mike, Chloe said, her voice quieter now, more subdued. But we were just having fun. It was supposed to be a joke. I didn't think it would go this far. I shook my head, incredulous. You didn't think it would go this far? Chloe, you left me behind. You humiliated me. You and your friends. You all thought it was funny. I've been dealing with the aftermath of that every day since you walked out. And you think it was just a joke? Chloe opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but I stopped her. No, Chloe. I don't want to hear your excuses. It's too late for that. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. There was a long pause. I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't let up. I wasn't going to let her make this about her again. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative like she always had. Finally, I took a step back, my voice low and steady. You came here to ask for something, didn't you? I said, watching her carefully. You didn't just show up to catch up. You want something from me. I'm done being your safety net, Chloe. You don't get to come back into my life whenever it's convenient for you. Not anymore. Chloe looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise, but also something else. Was it regret? Maybe. But it didn't matter. I had done everything for her, for them, and they had thrown me away. I'm done, I said, turning away from the table. You all can figure it out without me. As I walked away, I felt the weight of it lift off my shoulders, but there was something else too. Something like a door closing, and this time I wasn't looking back. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I finished my shift, went through the motions, and by the time I left, the diner had quieted down. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of peace settle in. It wasn't about the confrontation or about Chloe and her friends. It was about me. I was finally free of their manipulation, their games. And for the first time, I felt like I was truly in control of my own life. It had been a few months since I had finally told Chloe and her friends exactly what I thought of them. The weight I had been carrying for so long felt a little lighter, like a heavy stone had been lifted from my chest. The diner was thriving, and I was managing the second location with more confidence than I ever thought I'd have. Sure, I still had doubts now and then, but they were smaller, easier to push aside. I'd been getting used to this new life. And as I drove home one evening, the air crisp and the sun dipping below the horizon, I felt that sense of satisfaction that only came from hard work paying off. It was a feeling I hadn't had in a long time, not since those early days when I was still stumbling through life, unsure of what I wanted or where I was going. That night, Sienna and I had plans. We'd been spending more time together, and though we hadn't put any labels on anything, I could feel the connection growing between us. It was easy, comfortable, a welcome relief from everything else that had been so complicated in the past. But as I pulled into the small parking lot behind the diner, I noticed something unusual. There was a light on in the back office, the one I used for my paperwork. It wasn't unusual for me to leave the lights on, but this time something felt off. I paused for a second, staring at the office window. And then, before I could think twice, I walked inside. The air inside the diner was cooler than usual, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound, and then I heard it, the faint sound of a voice. It was Chloe's. I froze in the doorway, my breath catching in my throat. She was sitting at the desk in the back office, a piece of paper in front of her, but when she saw me standing in the doorway, her eyes widened in surprise. For a moment, neither of us said anything. You're still here? I finally asked, my voice low and guarded. Chloe stood up quickly, trying to act casual. She was wearing jeans and a loose top, not dressed up like she was when she first showed up at the diner. She looked different. More vulnerable. I didn't mean to intrude, she said, her voice a little shaky. I came by to see how you were doing, Mike. To check on you. I blinked, not sure whether to laugh or just walk away. Check on me. I said, the words coming out almost like a scoff. You've got some nerve showing up here after everything that happened. I know, she said quickly, stepping forward, her hands clasped in front of her. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, Mike. I needed to see you. To apologize. I know I messed up, but I didn't let her finish. No, you don't get to do this. You don't get to walk back into my life after everything you put me through. You think you can just show up, apologize, and everything will be fine. My words felt like they were spilling out before I could stop them, the anger and frustration building again, but this time, it didn't feel like the angry Mike who had been abandoned. It felt like the Mike who had learned to stand up for himself, who had learned to let go. Chloe took a step back, her face pale. I just thought maybe we could talk. I wanted to explain myself, Mike. To make things right. I've been feeling so bad about everything. Don't, I said, shaking my head. Don't try to make this about you, Chloe. This isn't about you fixing things. You can't fix it, and I'm done pretending that you can. Her face fell, and I saw the flicker of something in her eyes, regret, maybe, or even fear. But it didn't change the fact that she had already done the damage. She had walked away from me when I needed her, and she didn't get to come back into my life just because she felt bad. I had already closed that door. I'm not angry anymore, Chloe, I said, my voice quieter now, almost calm. I used to be. But I'm not anymore. Because I've learned something. You didn't break me. You didn't destroy me. You left, and I kept going. I built something here. Something real. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else come in and ruin it. I'm done with that life. She stood there for a long moment, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She just stared at me as if trying to find the right thing to say, but I didn't want to hear it. Not anymore. So, if you really came to apologize, I said, taking a step back toward the door, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear. I've already forgiven you. But that doesn't mean I need you in my life. You're not part of it anymore. And you can't just come back and act like everything is fine. I reached for the door handle, ready to leave it all behind me. Mike, Chloe started, her voice breaking, but I didn't let her finish. I didn't want to hear it. I hope you figure things out, Chloe, I said, my hand gripping the handle. But you're not part of this anymore. Not in the way you think. Take care. And with that, I walked out of the office, leaving her standing there, speechless. As I stepped into the quiet night air, a sense of relief washed over me. I wasn't sure what was next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I was moving forward. And this time, there was nothing to pull me back. I had finally let go of the past. And as I locked the door behind me and headed home, I realized something. The best revenge wasn't in confronting her or trying to get closure. It was simply in living my life. In building a future that was mine. And I was finally living it. It had been almost a year since the day I'd walked out of the diner after telling Chloe and her friends exactly where they could go. The diner had grown, and so had I. Running the second location had become second nature, and every shift, every customer, every plate of food that left the kitchen felt like another step forward. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it was mine. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of purpose. Sienna and I were spending more time together, though we still hadn't put a name on anything. It didn't matter. The connection between us was easy, natural. She'd started helping out at the diner when she could, occasionally picking up shifts or just hanging around after hours to help me close up. Her quiet support, her understanding was something I had never expected but desperately needed. And things with my family? I hadn't heard from them in months. There were no more guilt-laden messages or surprise visits from my parents asking for money. I had finally put my foot down, and I could feel the weight of their absence in my life. At first, it had hurt. But now it felt like a relief. I was sitting at the counter one evening, sipping coffee and flipping through the latest batch of bills when the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately, figuring it was just a late-night customer. But when I heard a familiar voice, I felt a knot form in my stomach. It was Sienna. "Hey, you look busy," she said, stepping into the diner, her smile a bit too bright, like she was trying to hide something. "Got a minute?" I pushed the stack of papers aside and smiled at her, waving her over. "Always got time for you," I said, motioning to the stool next to me. "What's up?" She hesitated before sitting down, her fingers playing with the strap of her purse. I could tell something was on her mind. "Mike, I've been thinking." My heart skipped a beat. The look on her face was serious, and I could feel the shift in the air. "About what?" "I've been working here for a while now, helping you out, spending time with you, and, well, I think it's time we talked about where this is going." She gestured between the two of us, her eyes searching mine. I frowned slightly, unsure of what she meant. "Sienna, we're building something here, right? This diner, us." I was trying to keep it casual, but the truth was I had been thinking about where we were headed to. I just hadn't known how to say it out loud. She nodded, biting her lip. "Exactly. And I think it's time I be honest with you about something. I've been offered a position elsewhere." Her words hit me like a freight train, and I felt a pang in my chest. A bigger opportunity at a restaurant in Denver. It's a big step up, and it's something I've been wanting for a while. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Denver? The idea of losing her, of her moving away, sent a jolt of panic through me, but I fought to keep my face neutral. And you're thinking of taking it? I asked, my voice tight. Sienna sighed, looking down at her hands in her lap. I don't want to. I don't want to leave here. But I've been offered this chance, Mike. It's a great opportunity for my career. But the truth is, I don't know what to do. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. My thoughts spun wildly as I tried to wrap my head around it. Sienna had become such a central part of my life, helping me with the diner and just being there, a constant presence in the chaos of everything I'd been rebuilding. The thought of her leaving felt like a punch to the gut, but I didn't want to be the one to hold her back. I don't want to keep you from your dreams, Sienna, I said softly, leaning back on my stool. My words were coming out slower than usual, as if I was weighing every syllable. If this is what's best for you, then you should take it. You deserve that. She looked up at me then, her eyes wide. I didn't expect you to say that, she admitted. But it's true. I don't know if I'm ready to leave here, though. This place, it feels like home. I leaned forward, the words tumbling out of me before I could stop them. You feel like home too, Sienna? Her expression softened and she reached across the counter, placing her hand gently over mine. Mike, I've spent a lot of time running from things. I've been scared to take risks. But I don't want to leave something good, you know? Something that feels right. The way she said it, the sincerity in her voice, hit me harder than I expected. My heart was racing, and for the first time in a long time I wasn't sure what to say. I had spent so much of my life fighting for something that wasn't real. But now, sitting here with Sienna, I realized that what I had here was real. This diner, this life, this chance to start over, it was real. I don't want to lose you, Sienna, I said quietly, squeezing her hand. You won't, she replied, her voice filled with warmth. I think I've been trying to make a decision for the wrong reasons. I've been thinking about the future, about what's best for my career, but the truth is I've never felt more at home than I do here. With you. I smiled, a weight lifting off my chest. So, what does that mean? It means I'm not taking the job in Denver, she said, her eyes lighting up. It means I want to stay here. With you. And help you keep building this place. Because this feels right. I could feel the relief flood through me, washing away the anxiety and uncertainty that had built up in the last few minutes. It felt like everything had just fallen into place. Are you sure? I asked, my voice rough with emotion. She laughed softly, nodding. Positive. I'm ready to help you build this together. And just like that, everything shifted. The fear, the doubt, the worry, it all fell away. I had never expected my life to turn out this way. But now I realized that everything that had happened, all the struggle and heartbreak, had led me here. To this moment. Sienna and I had a future together. And for the first time in years, I could finally see the road ahead clearly. It was mine to walk. We didn't need anything else but each other, this diner, and the future we were going to build together. I had found my home again, not in the past, but in the present. And that was enough. I'm glad you're staying, I said, the words a promise. Because I can't do this without you. She smiled, her fingers brushing over mine. You don't have to. We're in this together now. And for the first time, I felt peace.